Aloha, it's CreativeNameToStandOut again, and this time I don't have a battle report. I'm going to go over the Dark Elf Army book that just came out over the weekend. I'm going to discuss how the new Army book impacts my army, and then I'll go over the other choices in the Army book and just give my 2 cents on how I think they work, or what their best uses are for. I'm not going to go into any sort of comparison too in-depthly to other units in the book. I don't feel like that's very productive. I feel like when you take certain units and compare them to each other, you're putting them in a vacuum and not really thinking about them as far as your entire army is made up, who you're playing against, what kind of terrain's on the field, and a variety of factors that go into when you play. From my perspective, I feel like unless something's completely overcosted, for something, like extremely overcosted for something, it all serves a purpose. And as soon as you're able to find that role for them, that they can function at that role how you deem fit. Otherwise, you just put yourself in a box, and while that box might work for you, it's still a box. So, just not my playstyle. So again, I'm gonna go through here and discuss how the new army book affects my army, and then look over some of the other choices people might be interested in. So let's start. So the greatest effect that this new army book has on my army is points cost. Right here is my 2,500 point army. If I were to take the 50 points out of my army and count up the army points as it is, my army turns into a 2637 point army. That's almost 100 points more expensive than it used to be. So the first step I'm going to have to do with this new army book is to slim down my units. I'm going to have to take some units out and then either not replace their role, or try to figure out a way to have some of my units make up for the role that that unit had in my army. Otherwise, the other things that have changed is I've lost hatred on most of my units. They still hate high elves, but they have always strikes first instead, and that's really good still too. Being able to strike, it saves me from having to put that banner that I used to have in my executioner's unit, and overall it's a really good bonus. Other things I lost were the sorceresses can no longer just throw out however many dice they want at a spell, which is fair, and instead they got a +1 to all my attempts to cast if I use dark magic. So it's not like an equal trade as is hatred and always strikes first, but I rarely threw more than 6 dice at a spell anyways as it is. And so if I take dark magic, it's nice to have that +1 bonus. And finally, something completely different is we're given the power Murderous Prowess, which lets us reroll 1s to wound, which is again fantastic. Rerolls at any phase is a good thing. And there's various other changes, and a lot of them don't affect me. I think Sea Dragon Cloaks returned to Scaleless Skin. I don't really remember what they were beforehand. I never used anything with that. And as far as everything else, I think they have them in here with the repeater crossbows, but nothing else really changed. So let's move on to what my army looks like. Alright, so the first thing, the most important thing, is probably my magic phase. And so here are some changes to the Supreme Sorceress and the Sorceress I usually run. Generally I run Metal, and then I always just mix it up with a level 2 because I don't really care. She's really just a Dispel Scroll caddy, like most people use their backup sorceresses for. But as far as they go, I think my Supreme Sorceress is about 40 points cheaper than a normally runner, so that's good. And I think the regular Sorceress is 20 points cheaper, so I mean, it's great. I mean, losing points on anything is great, and because they also lost some abilities that they had, I think it's fair that they reduce the cost. Talking about things that have changed, the new dark magic is a lot different than it used to be. To me, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but it's very missile heavy. I think it's very shooty magic, and when I see very shooty magic lore, I don't think of it as a level 4 lore I would take. I usually think that's a support caster role. So if I take dark magic, most times I think I'm going to use it on my level 2, But of course, it's a new book, so I'm probably going to give it a shot with my level 4 early on. But I'm kind of in my natural biases will probably lead me to just drop it on a level 2. Um, the Sacrificial Dagger I'll probably continue to take, even though it's changed a little bit, and I think it's changed in a good way. It was it was definitely broken beforehand just to kill a person and roll a dice, and it still effectively does that, but you might have to kill more than just one person. So that's pretty much a rundown of the sorceresses. Alright, so the next Lord slash hero choice I'm going to go over are the Death Hags. I run 2 of them. I had a BSB Death Hag who gave my Executioners always strikes first, and I had a Death Hag who controlled my Cauldron of Blood. So the Cauldron of Blood is still a hero upgrade. My BSB is kind of in a weird situation. I don't really need her anymore in the Executioner unit because they now automatically have always strikes first. And if I were to put her in there now, they would have a disadvantage of being subject to frenzy with no benefit. Beforehand, I kind of justified it as at least they get always strikes first. Sure, they have they don't get the benefits of frenzy, but they suffer the consequences of frenzy. But she serves a purpose. Well, now she doesn't even serve a purpose, so I don't know what to do with her. I don't want to put her with my Cauldron of Blood unit, which I'm going to eventually do. Or I'm going to combine my Witch Hags with my Cauldron of Blood. Yeah, that's just too many points in one little unit, and that's just asking to be concentrated on and killed real fast. So I might create a small little 10-man, 10-woman, 10-elf bunker unit for her and just have her behind my lines. Or I might just bite the bullet and make a master, just a master BSB. I just haven't made up my mind yet. I'm going to play a couple games, see what I think. That's pretty much what it's come down to. I did buy that Witch Hag from some company, I forget, but so it looks good. I like it, and I would hate to not use it. So we'll have to see. It's going to take me a couple games to make up my mind. As far as the Cauldron of Blood's concerned, it's a lot different. It is now a Chariot instead of a War Machine, which is awesome. Chariots are great. The D6 impacts hits, and now it has +1 because it has size. It still has terror. It has all the same rules it used to have, pretty much, but now the terror actually matters. Now that I get to charge things. The War Machine beforehand couldn't charge anything. It gives my Witch Elves, which I'll have in the unit, a 5+ invul. All other things get a 6+ invul, and the machine itself gets a 4+ invul. I'm a 3rd edition player, 3rd edition 40k player, so I might say the wrong lingo, sorry. I meant ward saves. The Fury of Cain is an augment spell. It gives my units frenzy, and if they already have frenzy, it's +2 instead of +1. So that kind of is like the +1 attack I used to give, but now it has the frenzy drawback, but you know, it's still good. And it has the Strength of Cain instead of Killing Blow, which allows units within, or models within 6 inches reroll to fail the wound. And really that just comes down to the unit itself will have reroll to fail the wound. I feel like unless I'm purely on the defense, it's not going to come up very often where another unit's models are within 6 inches of this thing. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a Chariot instead of War Machine, and I think it's going to be great. I love Chariots. I wish I had Chariots in my armies previously. They just didn't sell the Chariots, and I'm probably going to buy one of the new Chariots. I'll get to that when I get to it. But having the Cauldron of Blood as a Chariot is just fantastic. So, sure, it will now be a lot more susceptible to cannon fire. Now it's toughness 6 instead of toughness 10. But I don't see a lot of cannons. They exist, but I don't see a lot of them. So last, the hero slash lord that will be affected by the army book that I run is the Canine Assassin. His stats remain the same. His leadership dropped 2 points from 10 to 8, but it doesn't really matter. He can't lead units. He gained immune to psychology, which I don't think will really matter because he's usually in a unit that doesn't have it, so he won't be affected by that rule. I think that the assassin's role is dictated by the poison you take. If you take Black Lotus, I think that you should be playing an army that is really taking advantage of the other things in the army book that affect your opponent's leadership. Black Lotus, if it inflicts a wound, also inflicts a -1 penalty to the leadership. You're pretty much also saying, I give up on using my assassins to kill your characters, so I'm just going to hopefully wound you and make you suffer that -1 leadership, and then when you get into combat and my other effects are going off, your army is more likely to break. Second is the Dark Venom Poison. This gives your assassin killing blow, which is theoretically good for killing lords. I personally, if I did that with my assassin, would be sending my assassin towards enemies' BSBs. In my experience where I play, BSBs aren't terribly protective. They usually have tankish mundane equipment, but they're not usually sporting a terribly great invulnerable save. So a BSB would be a good target. Finally, there's Manbane. He gets a +1 bonus to all his rolls to wound. If you're taking this, he's definitely not a character killer anymore. He is a combat multiplier for whatever unit you put him in, which it's not a bad roll. He is very squishy, so he will probably die. But it's not guaranteed. He is weapon skill 9, so people will need 5s to hit, and I'm sure if you have magic going off, you can make it a little bit harder. So that's how he's changed. Alright, so I want to quickly go over the lords and heroes that I don't use before I move on to the rest of the units. First is the Dreadlord and the Master. I'll go ahead and address them both. The Master is fantastic. He's really cheap. He has really good stats, 6, 6, 4, 3, 2, 7, 3, 9. He fills a great role at being anything you want him to be. He can be your BSB, he can be your tank. He can give, he can be kind of killing, so give your units a little bit of a combat multiplier. You can throw him into a Cauldron Knights unit, make it kind of a mini Death Star. Or you can put him on a Pegasus or whatever creature you want him on and have him go hunt things. So he's fantastic, he's cheap, he's great. Then there's the Dreadlord. He can't be the BSB, he can be everything else I already described, and he can be better at it. His drawback, though, is that he's really expensive, and when you're running a 2,500 point game, I have a hard time finding enough points to fit in 2 lords. And one of my lord slots is definitely going to be Sorceress, because whether I'm using her offensively or not, I need the defense. So I need the +4 to dispel. So while I like him and I don't have anything against him, I think his leadership 10 bubble would be great usually in an army. It's just hard to fit him in at a 2,500 point army. If we were to go to 3,000 points or more, yeah, I'd probably take one. I'd probably take a Dreadlord because he's pretty great. The final lord I'm going to go over / hero, these are both lords though, are the High Beastmaster and the Black Ark Fleet Master. I'm going to go ahead and tackle them both at once. They're both very themey type of lords that you would want to take. The High Beastmaster has some pretty good stats. It's a 7, 7, 4, 3, 3, 8, 3, 9. So he's pretty close to a Dreadlord. He's a lot more expensive, but that's because he can either come in for free, well, for free being it's already added into his point costs, a Mana Core, or a Scourge Runner Chariot. If I were to take these, I can't fit these in my army. They have no place in my army. But if I were to take a High Beastmaster, I mean, obviously, I think I'm doing these Monster Mash. And while a Dreadlord is better than a Beastmaster as far as options are concerned, I'm not being rewarded by a Dreadlord. The Beastmaster is giving me D3 attacks for one of my monsters. I might as well take advantage of it. I'm already playing a wacky army, so why not just add in a Lord that fits that theme and gives me a boon for it. Next is the Black Ark Fleet Master. He's more, aesthetically themed because his rules don't really lend themselves to the Corsairs as you think it would. He has a special ability called Show No Weakness, which in my opinion is not terribly bad. He becomes unbreakable if he gets in a challenge or kills a character. Now, I haven't checked the rule book, but I thought unit champions were characters, and I feel like positioning him well in a combat, because most people's champions are either on the corner or in the center, can give you that unbreakable. So if you need to make your unit an anvil that never breaks, I think it's more than possible that it happens. So I don't think he's that bad, and I would take him in a themed list. Alright, so let's get into the meat of the army. The backbone of the army, in my opinion, the most important part of the army, because if you don't have a sufficient amount of core troops, your army is probably just going to fall apart. So, first is the Dread Spears. The Dread Spears is what I use. They are spearmen, so they get the extra attack. They now have the Murderous Prowess, so that kind of improves because rerolls always improve, and they're pretty much the same. They're 2 points more expensive than they used to be, so that's unfortunate. It made one of my units 100 points almost more than it used to be. But I feel like if you're using Dread Spears, you're using them to be purely defensive. You're never going to charge with them. You're always going to just walk them up until you're 1 inch in front of your target and just go, charge me, and then take advantage of those extra attacks in that back rank. As long as they hold up for 1 turn, usually, that's what I use them for. I pick something my opponent has to go, hold them up for 1 turn, and I'll be happy. As long as they serve that function, I still think they serve that function, they're going to be good. Next are the Bleak Swords at the same price as the Dread Spears. They trade in the attack for a parry save. So I know a lot of people have broken down the math and said that in every aspect the Bleak Swords are better than Dread Spears. That's probably true, but I feel like when you break down that math, it's so inconsequential, it doesn't really matter. Like, sure, if every game breaks down to those probabilities that people say, yeah, then nobody would take Dread Spears, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just going to be inconsequential. Like, over a period of like 100 games, I'm not going to notice the difference, really. So to me, it's playstyle. Since I'm purely defensive, I'm never going to attack with them. I'm gonna use the spears. I'm gonna get the extra attack in. I don't care about that one-off game where I'm gonna run a bunch of parries. As long as they last for 1 turn, it's good. Now, if I'm gonna run a medium-sized unit and I don't know if they're going to be defensive or offensive, then yeah, I'll probably run Bleak Swords. I mean, on a flip of a switch, sorry. I can get them to be offensive, and they can stay defensive. They got that parry save. So it's really up to playstyle. Dark Shards, they're the most expensive infantry core unit we have in the book now. They're really expensive, but they're the shooty, they're the repeater crossbow armed troops, and they can take shields and basically become Bleak Swords. So I think they're appropriately priced because they're going to serve 2 purposes. They're going to be really shooty, and then they're going to be Bleak Swords. Next up, in between the cost of the Bleak Swords and the Dark Shards, are the Black Art Corsairs. They're moderately armored and moderately offensive, so I think that's a good price point to be in between. And yeah, so you're basically trading off a little bit of points for a little bit of protection and a little bit of offense. So I think that's fair. I'm going to skip the Dark Riders. We go straight into the Witch Elves, since the Witch Elves correlate with the Black Art Corsairs. They're the same price as the Black Art Corsairs. I use them. That affects my army a lot because now they're troops, so I guess it just makes my troop percentages look even better. If I got points for that, that's great. I guess the Witch Elves, being that they're the same points as the Black Art Corsairs, I'm sure most people will be like, well, why would you ever take Corsairs? Witches are awesome. Well, you would take Corsairs for the moderate protection and the ability to control them. The Witch Elves are with Frenzy, and they don't have a save of any sort. So I think it's fair to price them the same. I think you have to make a decision between what do you want. Do you want a fairly offensive unit with manageability, or do you want a super offensive unit with no manageability? Well, just like a decreased manageability. So I think those are fair. And I like the new Witch Elf models, so I'm probably going to buy a bunch of those. And then finally we have the Dark Riders. The Dark Riders are slightly cheaper than they used to be. If you were to pay the whole get-up for them, then they're considerably cheaper than they used to be. I run my Dark Riders as redirectors, so they're going to die no matter what. And sometimes I use them to kill other people's skirmishers, but usually only if I feel like they're, they're way better than another person's skirmishers. So probably like skinks. And even then, I don't know, because they could shoot me off before I get to them. So yeah, you could tool them up. Not a bad idea. but I will eventually just use them as redirectors, so I know they're going to die, so I try to keep them as cheap as possible. Alright, and the next unit is the unit I use predominantly as my central part of my battle line, which are the Executioners. Thankfully, they're the same cost as they used to be, and they gained Always Strikes First naturally. The drawback is they lost Hatred against everybody, which means I won't get to reroll hits against everyone. But now I get to reroll wounds as long as those wounds are a roll to 1. But if I am Strength 6, a lot of my guys are going to wound on anything but 1, so it gives me those rerolls back. They kept killing blows, so that's good. I was afraid they might take away that. Now that they are always naturally having Always Strikes First, I don't have to take my BSB as I mentioned earlier. So instead of having them in my center, where I used to have in my center so that if they did get out of control as far as Frenzy was concerned from the Witch Hag, at least they would be in the center of the line. They wouldn't be going anywhere too far. But now that I have more control of them, I'm probably going to swing them onto a flank, and I might end up putting my witches as my central line. In the flank, they can protect my flank, which is very important to me. Beforehand, I had to really anchor on terrain or castle up on one side, but now that I can have the spearmen on one flank and my heavy infantry on the other flank, I can possibly, when the need arises, advance straight down the center. So I'm kind of excited about using this, having this new aspect to my army. So, and another bonus, which I just noticed not too long ago, was that their leadership 9. That's a +1 bonus to the leadership, which is great. That means they won't break as easily, and I'm not required to keep a character there anymore to keep them in line. Alright, so the next special unit that gets affected by this new army book that I own are the Shades. They pretty much stayed the same, actually. So they're going to get the benefits of Always Striking First and Murderous Prowess, but points-wise they kind of stay the same, and their options stay the same, except you can take a full command right now, but I'm not going to do it, so it's not going to change much for me. I will probably use them the same way I've always used them, to win the skirmishing war, or to kill war machines. Because that's pretty much what they're for. And maybe late game, if I'm desperate, I'll use them as redirectors, or maybe set up double fleas between Dark Riders and Shades. But otherwise, I think they're generally the same type of unit they used to be. Alright, so last out of the special units that I own are the Harpies. They used to be troops, now they're Harpies, and now they're 4 points more expensive than they used to be. And that is a little much, I feel like, for what they are. To me, they are just redirectors. They don't fill any other purpose, minus maybe chasing fleeing units. I know there's sometimes I like to run them behind my executioners so that when I charge, there was that danger that my Harpies, if the enemy decided to flee, that my Harpies would fly over my units and run them down. And they still fulfill that purpose. They're just 4 more points than they are. And so for a unit that I pretty much just send off to die, I don't know if I particularly like that increase in comparison to the whole army increase. And being that I have to drop things, I'm probably going to drop the Harpies. So the role stays the same. I still think they're functional. I still think people will use them. I won't. So I forgot that the War Hydra is no longer rare. It's actually a special. It's 15 or 10 points. I forget. It doesn't matter. It's cheaper than it used to be, and it lost regeneration and hatred. And now it has a special rule that allows you to roll a d6 for every wound you've already lost, and every time it's a 4 or better, you get that wound back. It's no longer the walking death machine as it used to be. You can't throw it headlong into a unit and then expect it to have a good chance of coming out the other side. I think they brought it back in line with most other monsters, and I know a lot of people don't run like this, but I think monsters are for combat multipliers that are in there to help your ranged infantry win a combat, tip it in their favor, and cause the enemy to break. But a lot of people don't run their army like that. They kind of do the monster mash or no monsters at all. Which is unfortunate because I feel like they're missing out on some tactical opportunities. But that is what it is, and you can't change it. So let's move on. The Black Guard are 3 points more expensive than they used to be, and They have halberds, heavy armor, always strikes first, eternal hatred, immune to psychology, murderous prowess, and stubborn. I think they're justifiably expensive. Um, with the amount of attacks they have and the strength 4, with the rerolls they're going to get from either the hatred or the always strikes first, they're going to cream other people's infantry. They're just strong enough, and if you can give them a banner or any type of magical upgrade, they're going to be pretty effective against Cavalry. They're stubborn, so they're going to stick around to the last man, most likely. They're really good. If they made these guys too cheap, people would spam them. They took away the 20 cap max. People used to complain about that because they wanted to take a horde of them. Now they can take a horde of them, but it's going to cost them, and I think justifiably so, because these guys are pretty awesome. Even though individually you can point to other units and say this does this better than the Blackguard, you're paying for the Blackguard's in the moment flexibility on the field. They can pretty much turn into any role you need them to at a moment's notice. Alright, next up is the unit that arguably benefited the most from the new army book, and that's the Reaper Bolt Thrower. It is now 30 points cheaper, and that's just great because it's a war machine that depends on ballistic skill. It's strength 6, so most monsters are either toughness 6 or toughness 5, so it's not even guaranteed you're going to wound the creature, and then even if it does and gets through the regen save or whatever save it has, it's going to take D3 wounds. So I think it's great that they lower the cost on it, and it's probably going to make it more usable. I might even go out and buy some. Alright, so next up is our heavy cav, the Cold One Knights. They went up in points. I was kind of surprised. I thought they might go down, especially in this edition where cav kind of have a hard time to go toe-to-toe with some infantry. Like all heavy cav, you got to put them on your flanks and then work your way to the center. And if along the way they get redirected, I really think you lose most of the time, if not every time. There are too many points, and they're too much of a focus in your army to get squandered from some redirector. So I feel like because of that, they have a built-in weakness, and I thought their points would go down. Otherwise, you got to build your army around these guys. You can't just bring a unit of heavy cav in the game and expect them to function well. You got to bring things that will kill those redirectors so that your heavy cav deliver the day when you need them to be there. Otherwise, you're going to lose. So I have 20 of these, and I need to paint them up and put them together. But yeah, I also need to buy some models to work around them. Alright, and the Cold One Chariot's next. It pretty much stays the same. The Cold Ones themselves got the extra attack like all the other things did. And then the next one is the Scourge Runner. It's a bolt thrower chariot, so it can get into a better position and shoot where it needs to shoot. It has a strange ability where if it hits a monster and wounds it, it drags it d6 inches, and if it's over 3, it takes another wound. It's just a weird concept. I feel like if we shot first, then charge, it would be really strategic in that way, but as it is, it's kind of just an odd thing. You allow the monster to get closer to you, really. Maybe if it shot a flying monster and kept it from flying its turn, it'd be cooler. But it's not the case. We'll have to see how it works. Next up is the Doomfire Warlocks. These are the first of the many new rares we get. They are pretty excellent. It looks like they can kill skirmishers and war machines pretty easily, and possibly some characters. But again, they're pretty expensive. And I don't think people should confuse these as your typical fast cav. But they're not going to be able to fulfill some of the rules that I use my fast cav, for example. I would never throw these guys away as redirectors. Another thing to keep in mind is that even though they're really good at killing other skirmishers, they are dependent on magic, and it would be really easy for your opponent to turn the tables on you with those. Even with a 4+ invulnerable to things, some skirmishers are all about weight of attacks. And these units are not going to be terribly big, so say you're going against skinks or something that can equally be shooty, maybe night gutter runners, or whatever they're called. These guys are probably going to get their asses kicked because your opponent can really put you in a predicament if he just decides to spell whatever crappy spell that these guys are trying to do. So yeah, these are my feelings on them. I think they're really good. It'll probably get me some. But they do have some weaknesses. Alright, the next two I'm going to tackle are the Bloodrack, Medusa, and Shrine. I'm really going to have to play with these models to really figure out what their little niche is, because I just don't see what their purpose is. Face value in the rare slots. The Bloodrack Shrine is not durable. It's toughness 6, 5 wounds. Its armor save is 6. It has no invulnerable save, and it has magic resistance 1, which will give it a 6+ ward save against whatever magic missiles and direct damage somebody chooses to throw at it. I feel like they forgot something and they just threw that in. But then it has some special rules about wounding things based on their initiative rather than their toughness. When you break it all down, though, it's not a lot of shots and it's not a lot of wounds. So it's not really going to turn the tide of any battle. It is a chariot. But again, it's a chariot with a 6+ save, and it has a special ability that gives your Dark Elves +1 to their leadership and -1 to your enemy's leadership. And frankly, that's the best thing about it. And if I were to try to figure out what its role is, it's just one more of those leadership shenanigans that you can put in your army when you need it. The Bloodrack Medusa herself, though, is pretty good, I think. She could be pretty much just a harasser unit. She has movement 7, so she can work around your enemy's army pretty fast. Maybe she can tackle war machines if she needs to. But I think she would be good just to march block and just shoot the flanks of your enemy with her little gaze, especially if it's ogres or something. So yeah, that's my feelings on it. I think I'm going to reserve judgment on it till I get to play it a couple times. Alright, this unit, the Kharibdyss, I think it's called. I'm going to call it a Kraken from now on because it's easier to say. Has 2 abilities that help dictate its role. Its first ability is the howl it has. If it goes in with a support unit, I think it'll be most effective. This unit and an infantry unit can charge your opponent's infantry unit, and then hopefully with the wounds that are generated by this creature, you'll win the combat, and then its howl will go off, and your opponent will have to re-roll any successful leadership checks they make. So that's great, especially when we talk about these other leadership little things that are going on that could happen in an army. This is just another one of those things that you can add to the pile. The other ability, I think, makes it sort of a quasi-monster hunter. It has this ability where it's called Feast of Bones, where if it's 5 attacks. If they all hit the same model, it gets an additional D6 automatic hits at strength 7, and its weapon skill is 5, so it's not terribly unfeasible for it to actually hit all its hits, since most monsters' weapon skills don't get that high. So I like this dual role it has, and I'll probably pick me up one. Alright, so the last unit I'm going to go over is the Sisters of Slaughter. They are 5, 6, 4, 3, 3, 1, 6, 2, 9. They have 2 abilities that give them a 4+ ward in combat, and they deny parry saves. And the unit can't use their rank bonuses for close combat. So I feel like they're a support unit, definitely. You're going to use them in tandem with another unit. They have one other bonus where if they go against something that has a better weapon skill or strength, they get +1 to hit and a wound. So yeah, just use these in support. Probably not good to try to use this as your death unit. Just throw in a unit of 10 of them to support something else. So yep, this concludes my little review of the Dark Elf book. Overall, I think it's a great book. It's going to create some changes in my army because of the points costs, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible, so I'll get over it. Here's some parting shots of my empire I'm working on. It's going to take me a while before I can start any battle reports of these. I expect to get a game in on Monday with the new Dark Elves. I'll take some pictures, make a battle report, have it up by the weekend, I hope. Otherwise, that is it. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like if you like. If you have any comments, please give them. If you have any questions, please ask them. And if you're new, please subscribe. All right, thanks.